Well, we're talking about floods, but there's another concerning development around water, and we are learning that some of our dams are not safety compliant. The Department of Water and Sanitation presented information to Parliament which shows that of 20 large dams owned by the department, only 2 comply with safety requirements. There were some other revelations of grave concern, which we will now discuss with UFS Centre for Environmental Management, Professor Anthony Turton. Prof Turton, good evening to you and welcome to Full View. Just off the bat, your reaction to some of those details that were shared, including that 90% of our largest dams are non-safety compliant.
Yes, good afternoon to you, the listeners. These numbers are worrying. I've had sight of the whole set of data, and it's what you've mentioned is just one small point of that whole data set. The truth of the matter is that since about 2017, 2018, the government has slowly been going into backlog, being unable to even process the routine dam safety reports that are being sent to them. And this, of course, speaks to the loss of capacity within the Department of Water Affairs. And this is really just part of the bigger picture about the slow deterioration of our national infrastructure.
What are some of the red flags in those safety reports you're referring to?
Well, you must remember that dams are inherently dangerous things. You're putting in a valley, a plug that is designed to hold back billions and billions of litres of water, which can weigh millions and millions of tonnes. And a flood is by its very nature an angry and dangerous thing. So what you're doing in a dam is you are holding back multi-floods, multi-seasonal floods. You could even be holding back floods, that are of a decadal nature. And when these things come down, when the dam wall breaks, it is a catastrophic outcome. We saw just recently at that tailings dam that burst in the Free State area. That was just one kind of dam there. That's a different type of dam to what we're talking about now. But nonetheless, when it comes down, these things are absolutely catastrophic. So therefore, there has to be a high level of safety. And by virtue of the fact that South Africa is amongst the 20 countries in the world with a number in terms of the number of large dams it has. So therefore, we're a member of the International Commission of Large Dams, ICALD, and the bigger the dam, the bigger the risk. So therefore, you have to really comply with these things in a big way.
Give us a sense, Prof, of the scale of work that is needed to make sure that the infrastructure is sound. And I mean, it's really just staggering how you describe it, because I've never really thought about it like that, and I'm sure a lot of people haven't, that you're saving sort of multi-floods and in some cases, water that's been in a particular place for a long time really weighs a lot. You don't often think about it in those terms, but infrastructurally and structurally, how should they be built and maintained?
Yes, if you look at that image behind you right now, you'll see that there's a bow, there's an arch, so the dam is built in an arc. And the reason for that is because the dam actually flexes. So when it gets full, think of a bow and arrow. Think of a bow that you literally, as you put more pressure on the bow, so the dam wall actually changes its shape. And what happens now is you get different stresses within the dam wall and what have you, but all of the pressure of the water ends up on a couple of bearings, and those bearings are at the base of what is known as a swing arm radial gate. This is a gate that swings up and down, and those are the sluices that open and close. So the tons and tons and tons of water pressure are actually brought to bear on some very small bearing blocks, and those bearings have to be maintained. And I've actually been inside the Garib Dam wall when it was in full flood. And I'll tell you, it's actually quite a frightening experience because the entire dam wall shudders and hisses and mumbles and rumbles. It's really quite amazing. It actually moves, and it's quite a scary thing to be under this millions tons of water that's crashing down over your head.
And it is, when we see water in like a little gentle stream or a brook, you don't realize that at volume, at capacity, it is quite a spectacular thing and quite a dangerous thing as well. And so going back to what you described earlier, just with the incident that we had of that tailings dam in the Free State, the biggest risk when a dam fails, besides the fact that, we lose vast volumes of water, just share with our viewers again, just to land home that message that if things go wrong, it can have catastrophic consequences.
Yes, you must appreciate that if you just take, for example, a dam like Harip Dam, which is one of those that I believe is not compliant. Now, Harip Dam, it's one of the largest dams in the country. Now, if that thing fails, that flood goes down the river, and it takes a few days for that flood to end up into the ocean, at the other end of it. And unfortunately, you've got people that live along the banks of the river. You've got towns, you've got villages, you've got maybe even cities that are actually built on the river. Although in South Africa, we tend not to have that. But one needs to think only about a couple of years ago, there was that massive flood in Lanesburg in the Cape when there was a significant loss of life. And that was just from an ordinary rainfall event. So imagine now when you've got a multi-year rainfall event that suddenly comes crashing down the river valley, and it comes down with such force, it starts accelerating as it comes down, and it picks up all sorts of debris in its way. So it breaks down trees, it moves cars, it moves rocks and boulders. So it becomes a battering ram, literally a battering ram. And nothing can actually stand in its way. I mean, entire houses just get swept off their foundations, just in the blink of an eye. And we've seen, for example, a motor car that's up to its, it's not even up to its axles in water, suddenly gets swept away. That's how powerful water is when it's flowing. So imagine that now, multiplied a few thousand-fold because it's a flood or because it's a sudden catastrophic failure where you get this massive release of water, of millions of cubic meters of water per second that suddenly just goes thundering down a river.
What's your expert view on the action that needs to be taken right now, and who should be shouldering that responsibility in the immediate?
Okay, this is a highly technical matter, and we do have in South Africa deep experience. We have got consulting engineering professionals that have built the dams, that understand how to maintain them, etc. Unfortunately, what has happened over time now is that most of these professionals are in the private sector, and for some other reason, the private sector tends to have been bypassed. There seems to be part of government ideology now to build up state-owned enterprises as opposed to the private sector. And we're seeing this now, for example, with the current contracts that are being awarded for phase 2 of the Lesotho Highlands Water Scheme, for example. It's not a South African contractor. We're seeing Chinese contractors being awarded these contracts. Now, with each of those contracts that are awarded, we are simply bypassing the South African skills base. And all that's happening is that skills base is slowly eroding away. And I would estimate that we might have, if we're lucky, 20% of the skills that we had in the 1980s. The rest is gone. We might even be as low as 10% of the skills. And that's what we do at the SA Business Water Chamber. We try to consolidate the skills base that we have still in the private sector. We regard that as a national asset. These are technically competent people, but they live in company, they work in companies, and if those companies aren't given contracts, they can't sustain themselves. And then unfortunately, professional people simply migrate to where the work is, and you get a slow outflow of professionals from the country to the detriment of the country. So this is a national concern. And you must remember that what happens in a dam safety is only one small aspect of the broader infrastructure problematic. So it's all about, if you want to think of a high level label to put this thing under, it's all about infrastructure, getting on top of the infrastructure rollout curve and maintaining the infrastructure that you have, because a dam is something that is there for centuries if you manage this thing correctly.
And we cannot afford to manage it incorrectly for many reasons, not only because we're a water scarce country. We need to hold on to every, cubic millimeter or centimeter of water that we have, but also for the huge safety risk that it poses should something go wrong. Professor, as you've joined us this evening, thank you so much for raising the urgency of the issue. Let's hope that the right skills are brought to bear to do the rehabilitation work on those dams urgently to avoid catastrophe.